My granddaughter squeezed my hand so hard under the table that her little fingers left marks on my skin. She was only 8 years old, and her eyes were filled with a terror I had never seen before. Not even when she was sick. Not even when the power went out during that terrible storm last October. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of the wedding band playing in the distance. "Don't eat anything they bring you. Please." I looked at her. Her name was Adiz. She was small for her age, with her mother's cheekbones and her father's stubborn chin. She was wearing a yellow dress I had sewn myself, with little white flowers at the collar. Her braids were freshly done. She should have been happy today. Any other child would have been running between the tables, stealing extra cupcakes from the dessert stand. But Adiz was not running. She was trembling. I placed both my hands around her cold little fingers and leaned in close. "What's wrong, my love? Tell Grandma." She opened her mouth. Then she closed it again. Her eyes moved to someone across the room, and I followed her gaze. My son's new wife, Obiageli, stood near the entrance of the reception hall, laughing at something a guest had said. Her dress was the color of champagne, covered in tiny crystals that caught the light every time she moved. She looked radiant. She looked perfect. She looked like everything I had been trying to trust for the past 9 months. Adiz tugged my hand again. "Grandma, I heard something. Before the wedding. In the kitchen. I heard her talking on the phone. I felt the air leave my body slowly, like a leak I couldn't find." "What did you hear?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, though nothing inside me was steady anymore. Adiz's lip trembled. She said something about the food. About making sure certain people get a special plate. She paused. "She said your name, Grandma. And she said mine. My name is Ngozi Ease. I am 63 years old. I have buried a husband, raised 3 children largely on my own after he passed, and I have lived long enough to know that the world does not always warn you before it breaks your heart. But I was not prepared for this. Let me take you back. Let me take you back to where it really began, because a story like this never starts on the day everything falls apart. It starts much earlier, in the quiet moments, in the small details you choose to ignore because you want so badly for things to be all right. My son Chukwemeka, Emeka we call him, is 40 years old. He is a quiet man with kind eyes and hands that are always doing something, always fixing something, always useful. He is an engineer. He has always been the kind of person who believes there is a solution to every problem, that if you study something long enough, you will find the answer. He met his first wife, Neka, when they were both 25. I remember the afternoon he brought her home. She was laughing at something before she even walked through the door, and that laughter filled our whole house. I loved her immediately. Not because she was polished or impressive, but because she looked at my son the way you hope someone will always look at your child. Like he was worth staying for. They were married for 11 years. They had Adiz together. Those were good years. Difficult sometimes, the way all marriages are, but real and warm and full of life. Then Neka got sick. I will not dwell on those 2 years of illness, except to say that I have never seen a woman fight harder for her family and lose anyway. She passed when Adiz was 6 years old. Emeka held his daughter through the whole funeral and did not cry until they were in the car going home, and he thought Adiz was asleep. I was in the back seat. I heard everything. After Neka, Emeka became very quiet. He went to work. He came home. He helped Adiz with her homework. He cooked her favorite soup on Sundays. But the light behind his eyes dimmed, the way a candle dims when the wind gets in through a crack. I moved in to help with Adiz. I did not mind. She was the greatest joy of my older years. We had a routine, the 3 of us. It was quiet, but it was ours. Then, about a year and a half ago, Emeka came home one evening with a different expression on his face. Something I had not seen in a long time. A kind of cautious brightness, like someone who has found something and is afraid to believe it is real. "Mama," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "I met someone. Obiageli came from a good family, at least on the surface. Her father was a retired civil servant. Her mother ran a small fabric shop. She herself was an accountant at a firm in the city. She was 34, well-dressed, articulate, and she smiled easily. The first time Emeka brought her to the house, I watched her the way I always watch people who enter my family. Not with hostility, but with attention. You learn, at my age, that people tell you who they are in the small moments. In how they treat a child. In whether their kindness is consistent or only performed when being observed. She brought flowers that first evening. A nice touch. She admired the photos on the walls. She complimented my cooking 3 times, which was perhaps 1 time too many. And then she saw Adiz. Adiz was sitting on the floor near the television, drawing in one of her sketchbooks. She loves to draw. Animals, mostly. She fills entire notebooks with them. Obiageli knelt down beside her. "Ah, what a beautiful elephant. You drew this yourself." Adiz looked up. Something passed across her face. Not rudeness, exactly. More like instinct. Like an animal that senses something in the air before the weather changes. "Yes," she said. She turned back to her drawing. Obiageli laughed, a light and practiced laugh. "Shy," she said to Emeka. "She'll warm up." But over the months that followed, Adiz never warmed up. She was never rude. I raised her to have manners. But there was always a distance. She would leave the room when Obiageli arrived. She stopped drawing in the living room and moved to her bedroom instead. When Obiageli tried to involve her in conversations, Adiz would answer in single words and find a reason to leave. I noticed. I said nothing. I told myself it was grief. That Adiz was still protecting the memory of her mother. That Neka's space in this family felt threatened to her. I told myself that children adjust. That it takes time. I told myself a lot of things that turned out not to be true. There were small incidents over those 9 months that I filed away in the back of my mind without confronting directly. Once, Emeka was at work and I was at a church meeting. Obiageli had offered to pick Adiz up from school. When I came home that evening, Adiz was already in bed, even though it was only 6 o'clock. I went to her room. "Are you sick?" I asked. "No," she said. "Then why are you in bed?" She pulled her blanket up to her chin. "I just wanted to lie down." I sat beside her. I smoothed the blanket. I waited, the way you learn to wait when you have raised children. Finally, she said very quietly, "Grandma, why does she talk to me differently when Daddy isn't there?" My heart tightened. "What do you mean?" "She's different. When Daddy is there, she's nice. But in the car today, she said I was too sensitive and that I needed to stop making things about myself." A pause. I wasn't even talking about myself. I was just telling her about a project at school. I held her hand. I told her that sometimes adults say things without thinking. That it did not mean anything bad. That I was sure Obiageli had not meant to hurt her feelings. But I did not sleep well that night. There was another evening when I overheard Obiageli in the kitchen speaking on her phone. I was coming down the hallway, and her voice was low but not low enough. I only caught a fragment. "It's not going to be easy with the child always there. I need him to myself for a while. I'm working on it." I stopped walking. I stood in the hallway and I listened, but she had lowered her voice further or moved. I heard nothing else. I walked back to the sitting room and I sat down, and I turned on the television, and I watched it without seeing a single thing on the screen. Was I overreacting? Perhaps. Perhaps she only meant that she needed alone time with Emeka, which is natural enough for someone building a new relationship. Perhaps I was a suspicious old woman reading too much into a half-heard sentence. I kept watching. I kept being quiet. I kept telling myself to wait. Emeka proposed to her 6 months after they met. She said yes immediately. They were married 3 months later. A beautiful ceremony at a hotel in the city, with 200 guests and a band and a cake that had 4 tiers. Adiz was a flower girl. She wore her yellow dress with the white flowers at the collar. She walked down the aisle perfectly, scattering petals, and she smiled when people looked at her. But when no one was paying attention, her eyes were somewhere far away. And I was seated at table 5, watching all of it, feeling that something I could not name was sitting in the room with us. Something uninvited. Let me tell you about the morning of the wedding reception, because that is where the knot began to pull tight. The wedding ceremony itself had taken place at a church in the morning. The reception was held in the afternoon at the same hotel. There was a gap of about 2 hours between the ceremony and the reception, during which the wedding party took photographs, and guests mingled in the hotel courtyard with drinks and small bites. Adiz had been quiet all morning. I was not alarmed by that, because Adiz is often quiet in public. But I noticed, during the photograph session, that she kept finding reasons to stand close to me. She held my hand more than usual. She flinched slightly once when Obiageli came close to adjust one of the flower girl ribbons in her hair. I filed it away. I kept watching. When we moved inside for the reception and took our seats, Adiz sat beside me at table 5. My daughter Kayamika, Emeka's younger sister, was on my other side. The table was also shared with two of Emika's colleagues and their wives, all pleasant people, all laughing and enjoying themselves. The food was being served. The waiters moved between the tables with large trays. The first course was a light pepper soup, followed by small fried snacks. The main course was to come later: jollof rice, fried plantains, grilled chicken, and a variety of accompaniments. Adiz had eaten the pepper soup without issue. She had eaten 2 small snacks. Then she took my hand under the table, and her fingers were ice cold. "Grandma," she whispered, "don't eat anything they bring you. Please." I looked at her. I looked at her face. And I knew, with a certainty that bypassed every rational thought, that she was not being dramatic. She was not seeking attention. She was frightened. "Tell me what you heard," I said quietly, my voice low beneath the noise of the table. She told me. She had slipped away during the photography session. She had needed the bathroom, and the one closest to the courtyard was occupied, so she had gone further into the hotel, down a back corridor. Coming back, she had passed a room, a small service room or a back office, and the door was slightly open. She had heard Obiagili's voice. Adiz had not understood everything. She was 8, but she understood enough. Obiagili had been speaking in a mix of English and Igbo. She had mentioned a name Adiz did not recognize, perhaps someone from the catering staff. She had mentioned food. She had mentioned my name, Ngozi. She had said something about making sure we would not cause trouble at the next stage. And she had mentioned Adiz. I think she said something about my milk, Adiz told me, her voice very small. About my milk problem. I went completely still. Adiz has a severe lactose intolerance. It developed when she was about 5 years old. At its worst, consuming dairy products causes her significant pain, vomiting, and can lead to a dangerous dehydration if not treated quickly. Every person in our immediate family knows this. The school knows. Her pediatrician monitors it. It is listed on a medical card that she carries in her school bag. Obiagili knew. We had discussed it during one of the early family dinners months ago. I had made a point of explaining it clearly, as I always do when Adiz is in a new social environment. And now my granddaughter was sitting at a wedding reception, telling me she had heard her father's new wife speaking about that very condition. My hands were steady on the table. My voice was steady, but something inside me had turned to stone. "You did the right thing telling me," I said to Adiz. "Don't eat anything else right now. Nothing until I say so." She nodded, her eyes wide and trusting, the way children look at you when they believe you can fix what is broken. I prayed she was right. The main course arrived. The waiter who brought our table's food was a young man, perhaps 20, 22, with careful hands and a professional manner. He set down the plates with efficiency. Jollof rice, fried plantains, grilled chicken, a small side salad, and for 2 plates, mine and Adiz, a small additional dish in a separate white ceramic bowl. A kind of creamy sauce, pale and thick, arranged beside the rice like a garnish. The others at the table had no such bowl. I looked at it. I did not touch it. I looked at Adiz's plate and saw the same bowl, and I reached across quietly and moved it to the far edge of the table, away from her. Kayamika, my daughter, was reaching for her own food and had not noticed. The colleagues and their wives were already eating and talking. Nobody was paying attention to the 2 small white bowls. I stood up. "I'll be right back," I told Adiz, keeping my voice light. "Stay with Annie, Kayamika. Don't touch anything on the plate." Kayamika looked up. She saw something in my face. She is my daughter and she knows my face very well. "Mama?" "What?" "Just watch her," I said quietly. And I picked up the ceramic bowl from my plate and walked away from the table. I found the catering manager near the service entrance at the back of the hall. His name was written on a small badge, Kingsley. He was a stocky man in his early 40s with the look of someone who has been managing events for a long time and has seen most things. I placed the ceramic bowl in front of him. "What is this?" I asked. He looked at the bowl. "It's a cream sauce, Ma. We offer it as an optional." "Who requested it for our table?" He paused. "It was a special request. For specific guests." "Which guests specifically?" I kept my voice even. "Which names were given for this request?" He shifted. He looked uncomfortable. "It was passed down to my staff through. I would need to check the request sheet. Usually the bride or groom makes special requests." "I need you to check that sheet now," I said. "Right now. My granddaughter has a severe dairy intolerance, and I need to know whether that sauce contains any dairy product before I allow her anywhere near it. Kingsley's discomfort shifted into something more alert. He was a professional. He heard the words severe and intolerance and understood what I was implying, even if I had not spelled it out. "Of course," he said immediately. "Come with me." In the small back office, Kingsley spread out the request sheet on the table. It was a handwritten list on hotel letterhead, requests and notes for the catering team. My eyes moved down it quickly. Near the bottom, Table 5, guests Ngozi and the child, add cream sauce to plating. Guest request. I stared at the words. Guest request. My name. Adiz called only the child. Who submitted this? I asked. Kingsley hesitated. It came through on the morning checklist. My staff said it was handed in by one of the wedding organizers. Which organizer? What did she look like? He called his young assistant in, a girl of about 19 who had been handling the morning setup. I described Obiageli as precisely as I could. Champagne-colored dress. Hair up. Crystal earrings. The girl's eyes flickered. Just a small movement. But I caught it. Was it the bride? I asked her directly. She looked at Kingsley. He gave her a small nod that meant, answer honestly. I'm not sure it was the bride herself, she said carefully. It was a woman in a champagne dress. She came in during the setup and said she was passing on a message from the bride. My stomach dropped. I need you to keep this bowl, I told Kingsley. Don't throw it away. And I need you to write down what was just said in front of a witness. Kingsley was already moving. He had understood. He called for one of his senior staff, and he told his assistant to write down exactly what she had seen and when and sign her name to it. Then I looked at him and said very calmly, the calmest I have ever spoken in my life. What is in that sauce? He checked the kitchen notes. He came back to me a moment later. Heavy cream, he said. Butter. And a small amount of cheese. I want to pause here and tell you something. I am not a dramatic woman. I have never been the kind of person who shouts at gatherings or makes scenes. My mother raised me to handle difficulty quietly and firmly. I have buried people I loved. I have gone through hardship without falling apart in public. I know how to hold myself together. But standing in that back office, with a ceramic bowl of cream sauce on the table in front of me and the words, heavy cream, butter, cheese ringing in my ears, I felt something come loose inside me that I had been holding together for 9 months. Because it was not a mistake. You do not make a special request to single out 2 specific people at a table for an additional dish. You do not write the grandmother's name and call the child the child. You do not do any of that by accident. And if Adiz had eaten that sauce, if I had not listened to her, if I had dismissed her fear as a child's dramatics and told her to eat her food, we would not have been sitting in a hotel room eating wedding cake by the evening. We would have been in a hospital. I straightened my back. I picked up the written statement that Kingsley's assistant had just signed. I thanked them both. I told Kingsley I would need him to be available in the next 30 minutes, because there were going to be some questions asked at this reception, and I needed someone who could confirm what we had just found. Then I walked back out into the wedding hall. The reception was in full celebration. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses. Emeka and Obiageli were on the small raised platform near the cake table, posing for photos with a group of her relatives. Emeka had his arm around her, and he was smiling, a wide and open smile, the kind I had not seen from him since before Nneka got sick. I stood at the edge of the hall for a moment and watched my son. I thought about what I was about to do. I thought about what it would cost him. Then I thought about Adiz in her yellow dress, sitting alone at table 5, not eating, waiting for her grandmother to come back and tell her she was safe. I walked to the table. Kayamika was sitting very straight, watching me approach. She had moved her chair slightly closer to Adiz. Her hand was on the back of Adiz's chair. My daughter has always had good instincts. I sat down. I put the written statement and the request sheet on the table, face down for now. Is everything all right? Kayamika asked, her voice low. No, I said. But it's going to be handled. Adiz looked at me. I took her face in both hands and said quietly, You were right. You did exactly the right thing. Are you all right? She nodded. Her eyes were wet, but she was not crying. She was holding herself very still, the way children sometimes do when they are trying to be brave. Stay with your auntie, I said. I need to speak to your father. I crossed the room to where Emeka was standing. He saw me coming, and the smile stayed on his face for a moment, the instinctive response of a man at his own wedding who is still in the warmth of the day. But he knows me. He has known my face for 40 years. And as I got closer, the smile changed. Mama. His voice dropped immediately. What's wrong? Come aside with me, I said. Please. He excused himself from the group. Obiageli watched us go, and for just a moment, just the space of 1 second, her expression shifted. Something moved behind her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the polished, pleasant face she always wore. I noticed. I kept walking. I took Emeka to a quiet corner near the windows, away from the noise of the tables. I handed him the request sheet first. I watched his eyes move across the words. I watched his face. He is an engineer. He processes information methodically. He read it twice before he looked up at me. What is this? He asked. His voice was careful. It is a catering request that was submitted this morning during the setup, I said. A request for a specific cream sauce to be added to the plates of myself and Adiz. Adiz only. He stared at me. Emeka, I said quietly. Your daughter is severely lactose intolerant. The color left his face. He looked at the paper again. He read it again. His jaw tightened. Who? He began. A woman matching Obiageli's description submitted this note this morning. One of the catering staff saw her. The assistant has signed a written statement. I handed him the second document. He stood very still for a long moment. The kind of stillness that is not peace, but the suspension of something enormous that has not yet fallen. Is Adiz all right? He asked. She is fine. She did not eat the sauce. She came to me before the main course arrived. I paused. Your daughter saved herself today, Emeka. She listened to her instincts and she trusted her grandmother. You need to go to her. He looked across the room to table 5, where Adiz was sitting with Kayamika. His face, in that moment, was something I cannot fully describe. It was the face of a man whose world is coming apart at the seams, who is trying to hold the most important part of it together. He moved toward the table. I turned and looked for Obiageli. She was near the dessert table now, speaking to one of the older female guests, a woman with a large hat who was laughing at whatever Obiageli had just said. Obiageli's posture was easy, relaxed. Her champagne dress caught the light. She looked, by every outward measure, like a happy new bride at her own wedding reception. I walked toward her. She saw me coming. Her smile did not waver. It was a trained smile, I realized. One that stayed in place regardless of what was approaching. Mom Ngozi, she said warmly. Are you enjoying the... I need to speak with you, I said. Now, privately. Something shifted very slightly in her eyes. Of course, she said, still smiling. Excuse me, she said to the woman with the hat. We moved to a quieter section near the side wall, away from the nearest tables. I did not raise my voice. I had decided, on my way across the room, that I would not raise my voice. Not because I was not angry. I was more angry than I have words to describe, but because I had learned a long time ago that a quiet voice in moments like this carries more weight than shouting. I showed her the request sheet. Can you explain this? I asked. She looked at it. Her expression did not change. This, too, was practiced. I had shown something terrible to someone, and their face had not moved, and that told me everything about how many times they had rehearsed controlling their reactions. I don't know what that is, she said. Your description matches the woman who delivered this note to the catering team this morning. A member of staff saw her. There is a signed statement. A pause. Very brief. Staff make mistakes all the time. Someone could have misidentified me. The note names me and names Adiz specifically. I kept my voice even. It requests a cream sauce for our plates and no others at the table. Adiz has a severe dairy intolerance. You knew this. I don't know what you're suggesting, Mom Ngozi, but I would never. My name is Mrs. Ease to you, I said. She stopped. I looked at her for a long moment. I looked at her the way you look at something you are trying to understand completely before you speak about it. A child nearly came to serious harm today, I said. My granddaughter came to me frightened and trembling and told me she had heard something. And she was right to come to me. And I am telling you now, if you intend to remain in this family, if you intend to remain in my son's home, there will never, not once, not for a single moment, be anything like this again. I paused. And if there is, I will not handle it quietly. She stared at me. The polished surface of her held for another moment. Then something cracked. She's the one causing problems, Obiageli said, and her voice had changed. The sweetness was gone. It came out low and tight, like a wound pulled too fast. That child has been against me from the very beginning. Everything I do, she tells Emeka, she tells you she. She is 8 years old. I said. She is trying to keep her father to herself. She is trying to. She is 8 years old, I said again. And she lost her mother 2 years ago, and she deserved better than what you tried to do today. Obiageli's jaw clenched. Her eyes moved past my shoulder, and I knew without turning that Emeka had come to stand behind me. I will not give you every word of what happened next, because some of it was my son's private pain to carry, and it is not mine to share in detail. But I will tell you that Emeka stood in that corner of the reception hall, and he looked at his new wife with a face I recognized from the day we buried Nneka. The face of someone who has understood something, and will not be able to ununderstand it. He had spoken to Adiz. He had listened to her fully, probably for the first time regarding Obiageli. He had read both documents. He had sent Adiz back to Kayamaka, and he had walked across the room with the particular steadiness of a man who has made a decision. "Tell me the truth," he said to her. Quietly, just those 4 words. Obiageli looked at him. The calculations behind her eyes were visible, now that the mask had slipped. She was deciding how much to deny, how much to reframe, how much she could still retrieve. She chose to reach for his hand. "My love," she started. "You know I would never." He stepped back. Not dramatically. Just 1 step. But it was the clearest thing I had ever seen. "The catering manager has the note," he said. The assistant signed a statement. "Adiz heard you on the phone this morning." He stopped. "My daughter does not lie. Your daughter wants her father to herself, and she's been poisoning you against me since. My daughter is 8 years old, and she was sitting at a table not eating her food because she was afraid," Emeka said. His voice broke slightly on the last word, and he steadied it. "I asked her why she was afraid, and she told me." Obiageli was silent. "I asked you to tell me the truth," Emeka said. She looked at him. Something moved across her face that I could not categorize. It was not quite guilt, not quite defiance, something in between, something that had lost its footing. She did not speak. Her silence was the answer. Emeka asked her, very calmly and very quietly, to leave. Not the marriage. That would come later, with the weight of paperwork and difficult conversations and the long quiet of a house adjusting to another absence. But for that day, for that afternoon, in that reception hall where 200 guests were eating cake, and he was standing in a corner with his heart in pieces. Leave. She left. She gathered her small evening bag and her shawl, and she walked out of the reception hall. And I do not think she cried until she was outside, and I cannot tell you whether those tears were regret or frustration or something else entirely, because I am not able to know what lives inside someone else. I watched her go. Then I turned and walked back to table 5, where Adiz was sitting with her Auntie Kayamaka, and I sat down beside my granddaughter, and I took her hand. "Is Daddy okay?" she asked. "He will be," I said. "He's going to come sit with us in a minute." She looked at me carefully. "Did you fix it, Grandma?" I thought about that question for a moment. Fix is a complicated word. Some things, once broken, cannot be put back into their original shape. You can repair them, reinforce them, rebuild them into something different and perhaps even stronger. But fix, in the way a child means it, returning something to its before, no. "I protected you," I said. "That's what I came to do." She leaned her head against my arm. Her yellow dress with the little white flowers crinkled slightly. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Thank you, Grandma." In the weeks and months that followed, our family was quieter than it had been in a while. Emeka filed for an annulment. It is a long and complicated process, and I will not bore you with the legal details, except to say that the signed statement from the catering assistant was kept carefully, and the catering manager, Kingsley, proved to be a man of genuine integrity who confirmed the account in writing when asked. Whether any formal action was taken beyond that is Emeka's matter to decide, not mine. He is a grown man. He is the head of his household. My role was to protect my granddaughter, and I had done that. Emeka went through another period of quiet. This one was different from the quiet after Nneka died. That had been the quiet of devastation, of someone trying to find their footing on ground that had disappeared from beneath them. This quiet was more like the quiet of a man who has been burned and is now being careful about fire. I did not push him to talk. I cooked. I kept the house. I walked Adiz to school in the mornings when Emeka had early work commitments. I told her stories about her mother when she asked, which she still did, regularly, the way children keep asking for stories they need to hear. Kayamaka, my daughter, Emeka's sister, was a steady presence through all of it. She has always been the practical one in our family. She organized the paperwork. She accompanied Emeka to the lawyer's office twice. She did not make a fuss about any of it, but simply appeared when she was needed, which is, I have always believed, the truest form of love. And then there was the matter of Adiz. I had been watching her carefully, braced for the aftermath of that day to appear in her. In nightmares, in clinginess, in some new withdrawal or anxiety. Children carry trauma quietly, and I know better than to assume that because a child is not crying, she is not hurting. But something surprising happened. Adiz became, in the weeks after the wedding, slightly more herself than she had been in a long time. I think it was because she had been heard. She had said something frightening out loud to her grandmother, and her grandmother had believed her, and things had been different because of it. For a child who had spent 9 months feeling something was wrong and not knowing how to say it in a way adults would accept, to have that feeling taken seriously was something solid to stand on. She started drawing in the living room again. Animals still, but now people too. Families of them in her careful 8-year-old lines. Elephants with their children, birds in their nests. One afternoon she showed me a drawing she had made. It was a picture of a woman and a small girl, hand in hand. The woman had gray hair drawn with careful zigzag lines. The small girl was wearing a yellow dress. "Is that us?" I asked. She nodded, pleased with herself. "It's beautiful," I said. "I'm going to keep it," she told me very seriously. "I'm going to keep it forever. I want to tell you about one evening, about 3 months after the wedding. Emeka came home from work, and Adiz was at the kitchen table finishing her homework. I was cooking. He set down his bag, and instead of going upstairs to change as he usually did, he sat at the kitchen table across from his daughter. "Adiz," he said. She looked up from her homework. "I owe you an apology," he said. She blinked. Children are surprised when adults apologize to them sincerely. They expect adults to explain, to justify, to reframe. But a direct apology from a parent to a child without conditions is a rarer thing than it should be. "I should have listened to you sooner," Emeka said. "I saw that you were uncomfortable. I told myself it was just adjustment, that you would come around. I was wrong to do that." He paused. "You were trying to tell me something, and I wasn't listening properly. I'm sorry." Adiz looked at him for a long moment. Then she put down her pencil, got up from her chair, and went and hugged her father. He held her for a long time. He was very still. I kept my eyes on my pot and did not turn around, because there are moments that belong only to the people in them. And this was one of those. When he finally let her go, Adiz went back to her chair and picked up her pencil and continued her homework, as though the apology had settled something that had been waiting to settle for a long time. Emeka looked up and caught my eye across the kitchen. I gave him a small nod. He nodded back. A year has passed now since that day at the wedding. Emeka is quieter, but he is not broken. He is, I think, more careful now, more thoughtful. He looks at Adiz differently, not with guilt, though that is still there sometimes, but with a new kind of attention, as though he has recalibrated what matters and where to put his eyes. Adiz is 9 now. She drew my birthday card herself this year, a grandmother elephant and a small elephant, walking together under a large tree. She has started asking about Neka in new ways. Not the old grief questions, the ones full of longing and confusion. Now she asks things like, what did Mama like to do when she was my age? And did Mama have a favorite color? She is building a portrait. She is keeping her mother alive in her own way, in the way children do when they are ready to carry that love forward rather than just mourn it. I am not going to tell you that everything is perfectly healed. That would be a lie, and I have lived too long and seen too much to offer you comfortable lies. Emeka's heart has scar tissue now, where there was already scar tissue. The annulment, when it was finalized, was quiet and final and brought no real relief, only the closing of a door. He has not dated anyone since. I do not know if he will. I do not push him. I light a candle for him at church, and I leave the rest in larger hands than mine. What I can tell you is this. The family flame did not go out. It was nearly extinguished, not once, but twice, first by grief, and then by something much more deliberate. But it held, and it holds still. I have been sitting with this story for a long time, trying to understand what it means. What lesson lives inside it? I am not a philosopher or a pastor. I am a grandmother with gray in my hair and tired feet, and a granddaughter who draws pictures of us to keep forever. But I have thought about this enough to offer you what I have. The first thing I want to say is this. Listen to children. Not politely. Not with half your attention while you are managing your adult world. Actually listen. Adiz came to me trembling and afraid, and the easiest thing in the world would have been to tell her she was imagining things, or that she was just sad about her mother, or that she needed to give things time. It would have been the comfortable thing. It would have kept the peace at that table for exactly as long as it took for the main course to arrive. Instead, I listened. And because I listened, she is all right. Children do not always have words for what they perceive. But they perceive. Their instincts are not yet covered over by all the reasons adults have for not saying what they see. When a child who loves you and trusts you looks at you with frightened eyes and says something is wrong, please believe them. Please. The second thing I want to say is about the kind of love that holds. My son fell in love with someone who was performing a version of herself, a version that held together well enough in good light and at a distance, but that could not sustain closeness. That is not a story unique to him. Many of us have loved performances. Many of us have wanted so badly for something to be true that we looked away from the small signs that it was not. But there is another kind of love, the kind that shows up when Emeka is not home, when there is no audience, when there is nothing to gain. The kind that sits by a sick child's bed through the night. The kind that packs a lunch with care and writes a note in it with a small drawn face. The kind that comes, not with a performance, but with presence. That love is the kind worth building a family around. And the third thing, perhaps the most important, is about speaking. I have always been a quiet woman. I handle difficulty privately. I think before I act. These are qualities that have served me, but they have also, in this story, allowed things to go on longer than they should have. Every small incident I filed away. Every half-heard sentence I set aside. Every moment where I saw Adiz's eyes go distant and told myself it would pass. I was protecting the peace. I was protecting my son's happiness. I was protecting the fragile thing we had built together after Neka. But there comes a moment when protecting the peace means handing harm a key to your door. And when that moment arrives, you must speak. You must stand at the table and say what you know to be true, regardless of the audience, regardless of the discomfort, regardless of the tears it costs you. Not with cruelty, not with performance of your own, but clearly and firmly and without apology. Your voice, your true voice, the one that speaks for the people you love, is not something to be kept quiet for anyone's comfort. If you have been watching this, wherever you are, whatever you are carrying, I want to ask you one thing before you go. Think of the people in your life who are carrying something silently. The child who is too quiet. The person who has withdrawn. The one who flinches in small ways that you notice and then look away from. Ask them. Just ask. And when they answer, stay still long enough to really hear what they're saying. Because sometimes the most important thing you will ever do for someone you love is simply to believe them. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of something or someone or showed you something you needed to see, please like and share it, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. Every story here is told in the hope that it reaches the person who needs it most. Take care of your people. Take care of the little ones. And always, always listen. God bless you, wherever you are watching from.